Hello, I'm Morris Ruddick. This is the third in a series about the Joseph calling. I've heard a wide diversity of observations about Joseph over the years, but in my role of painting a portrait for you, allow me to make a few observations of my own about Joseph. Joseph heard God's voice. He was spiritually in tune. God's favor was upon Joseph. He spoke truth without qualification, as a man of honor and integrity. Joseph perceived life around him and operated from God's perspective. He understood the times. Joseph had no use for form or tradition. He was a unique type of leader, a leader with a servant's heart. He put obedience to his calling before his personal desires. And Joseph forged strategic alliances in some of the most unlikely places. It is because of the times that we live in, as the Lord brings the diverse factions of the church together in unity, that I believe the Lord is designing a mosaic, a plan of how his body is prepared, of how his body will operate during the emerging end-time harvest. Times that I believe will be times of incredible change and disruption, but at the same time, times of unparalleled opportunity for the kingdom and for Israel. It is within these times that I foresee a company of Josephs, some operating individually, some in groups or networks. Josephs, who is visionary servant leader administrators, by the hand of God, are going to be thrust into positions of influence and authority. And as a result, will be playing a pivotal role in changing the course of nations, in preparation for, and as we enter these times of an outpouring of God's Spirit. The foundational attribute that differentiated Joseph, I feel, can be best summed up with the words I heard a young Christian leader share at an early morning businessmen's prayer gathering that I attended years ago. This young man introduced what he had to say with the following words: "I sit in the presence of the Lord." There are many things that I could share with you today, but what I share with you is what I have brought from the presence of the Lord. In my mind, Joseph was, and the Josephs of today will be found to be those who spend time in the presence of the Lord, because everything else will flow from that. Everything else, like being spiritually in tune. Everything else, like understanding the times. Everything else, like having the innovative thinking that marked Joseph. Thinking not tied to the forms or traditions associated with this is the way that we've done things in the past. Thinking that is a reflection of the principle that Jesus spoke of new wineskins. Thinking that becomes the catalyst in forging strategic alliances. Everything else, like the unusual favor operating on Joseph within the secular realm. Favor that was recognized as coming from God. The Joseph type of servant leadership is going to be the way it is, and the people-person quality of Joseph, resulting in Joseph being a master networker. Joseph had an unqualified obedience to the Lord, regardless of the cost, and he paid that cost. He was a man of integrity, a faithful servant, a man under authority. Another key observation about Joseph was the religiously unorthodox context that the Lord chose to place Joseph, for him to be used so uniquely as an instrument of God's purpose. Joseph was totally immersed in the world system. Yet Joseph was in the fullness of bringing about God's purposes for God's people. A genuine alliance of secular enterprises being used for God's purposes. You might describe the Lord's design and where he placed Joseph as an interlinking of secular enterprises with overriding kingdom objectives. The time of the Josephs is indeed at hand. Indeed, these are trusted servant leaders who have a clear call and mandate from the Lord. Men and women who God has uniquely prepared. These are people who are untouched and unfazed by the love of money or power. People whose overwhelming motivation is to serve God's kingdom. These are people with unusual administrative abilities who clearly hear God's voice, as well as reflecting a gifting and ability to recognize opportunities, reflecting witty inventions and ideas and new discoveries. These are gifted networkers, people who know how to develop strategic alliances. But there's another dimension operating among the genuine Josephs, one that differentiates them from those who may be well-meaning and able, but are either not called or simply just not prepared as the genuine Josephs of this hour. This is a pivotal dimension that differentiated Joseph of old from others with unique talents and abilities. Much importance is ascribed to Joseph's insights into Pharaoh's dreams, but it was more than the fact that Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, more than the fact that he understood the times, which he certainly did. And it was even more than the fact that he knew what to do by mapping out a really great plan of action. No doubt about it. Joseph was a genuine strategic planner, but it was more than that, a whole lot more. These factors were certainly important. Pharaoh first acknowledged that the Lord was with Joseph when he asked, "Can we find such a man such as this, in whom is the Spirit of God?" That recognition of the Spirit of the Lord operating in Joseph was certainly a pivotal foundation for what was to take place in the years ahead. But it was when Joseph both recognized the Lord being with Joseph and then said, "There is no one so discerning and wise as you are." It was at this point that Joseph was promoted to sit alongside of Pharaoh. What Pharaoh was responding to in Joseph that caused Joseph to be elevated to sit alongside of Pharaoh was not the plan or model, but the recognition of the wisdom operating in Joseph that Pharaoh saw as coming from God. Otherwise, Pharaoh could have just taken the plan and just dismissed Joseph. Wisdom. A word of wisdom from on high. The recognition of the operation of the flow of God's wisdom. A prophetic word of wisdom that unlocks the dilemmas that baffle even the most astute kings of this world. Wisdom. Wisdom that comes from on high. When we go back to the time of Joseph's promotion to sit alongside Pharaoh, it is clear that Pharaoh recognized the flow of God's wisdom operating through Joseph. The plan was certainly significant, but what was recognized by Pharaoh and what he saw in Joseph was a prophetically sound impartation of wisdom from on high as an answer to the challenge of that particular situation. And I believe this type of wisdom is going to be a very pivotal, distinguishing characteristic of the Josephs of our day. So it is in this hour that the Lord is raising up around the world a company of Josephs. Josephs who are already operating within the world system. There is an ancient Jewish concept of a laity that's captured in John's Revelation when it says, "He has made us to be kings and priests." This old covenant concept of kings applies very aptly to Christian business leaders, kings who spend time in the presence of the Lord, who understand the times and know what to do, who are the warriors and administrators, who go out and take dominion, who pave the way, who provide protection, and who undergird the work of the ministry. But the means by which the tasks for this hour are accomplished are going to be through alliances, strategic level alliances, and a multiplicity of these alliances between businesses and ministries, alliances fueled by the Joseph model. The Joseph-Pharaoh alliance was one that was completely unorthodox in terms of the expectations of God's people for that time frame. It didn't fit with their mindset. And the alliances the Lord will be initiating in our time frame are going to require what I call new wineskin thinking, because they will be unlike any that we have had in recent days. Certainly a great deal more than today's traditional mindset of give me your shekels, then go on your way. Many Josephs of today will be involved in opening doors not accessible to traditional ministries, such as the role currently being attempted by tent-making missionary endeavors. There will be Josephs of this hour used mightily to serve as catalysts for developing creative means of providing resources for God's people. In other cases, there will be ambassador-level Josephs, those who are given unusual authority that will change the course of nations as they were brought to work alongside the pharaohs of our day. And I believe the Josephs of our day are going to be gifted networkers who provide or become links between a new era of ministry endeavors and the world's resources needed to fund the strategic initiatives emerging. There will be other pivotal roles the Josephs of our day will be playing, many other pivotal roles. In some cases, the Josephs of this era will be at the forefront of activities, but in many cases, the Josephs will be a hidden group, operating behind the scenes in terms of their role as unique instruments of God's purpose. Please hear this. I believe this interlinking of business and the kingdom will extend into many non-traditional formats and mechanisms. Non-traditional in terms of the methodologies that are the generally accepted practices and standards for the operating of churches and parachurch ministries. New wineskins are needed for the new era we are entering. New wineskins and new mindsets to enable the effective functioning of the interlinking of secular business enterprises with overriding ministry objectives. In our next session, I'll be giving you some examples, and I'm Morris Ruddick.